What's up, everybody? College football week 6. Welcome to the SHIPIT Nation College Football Show. My name is Bill. Look for me on Discord and Twitter. Just put $1 in front of my name and you'll find me. Ready for another college football slate. Here at SHIPIT Nation, we're pushing for 10K subscribers on YouTube. Not very hard. If you're watching, you might as well subscribe, like the video. It gets the content out there. It just grows the sport of college football in the DFS world. And we're working on some pretty special stuff once we get to 10,000 subscribers, and we're real close. So you could be the one that puts us over. As far as this week goes in college football, we'll start with contest selection. I'm not going to go through every single one. The 150 max contests are pretty top heavy, just like always. You're going to find a lot better payout structure in the 20 max contest, especially, like the $1 is always a good one. The $4 20 max. They have some pretty good structures. And then the single entries. I'm a big fan of single entry contests. They have everything from $5 to $12 to $100 to $200 single entries. And then obviously, if you're like me and you play in the cash game streets, you like those double ups. But the best contest on DraftKings, this SHIPIT Nation Touchdown Hoedown Listener League, rake free. I believe the only rake free contest on DraftKings, the only one I'm aware of. So it's the best payout structure because we're not paying the rake at all. There's still plenty of spots available, so go ahead and click the link in the description of this video to get in that listener league. But we're going to jump right into the action because we got a 14-game slate. We got a lot of players, a lot of teams to get to. Starting with Missouri and Texas A&M. On the Missouri side, a 23.3 team total isn't bad, but as you'll see at the rest of the slate, there's actually a pretty low game overall. Nate Noel is the one guy that you're really looking at as far as, his price versus his production. He's the number one guy in the backfield. He came over with Drink. Well, a year after Drinkowitz came over, but he was recruited by Drink at App State. Now he's with him again in Missouri, and he's just taken over the backfield. Theo Weiss is technically the number one receiver on this, on the stat sheet for Missouri so far this year. But now we're getting into conference play. Luther Burden is starting to emerge these last couple of games. You're paying a price for Burden, but the production is, as we get into these conference games, we're going to start to see the production funnel. For some of these teams where we're going to see it go. And with Missouri, it's pretty clear that it's going to be Burden. And then Weiss is a second, especially, if Marquise Johnson is out. I don't know that it really bumps up anybody in this passing game. It just kind of funnels even more usage to those top receivers. And then Brady Cook. This is the cheapest we've seen him all season, so I don't mind that. Marcel Reed, far too cheap. They priced him down. He's going to start. Most likely going to start. Elko's been pretty like, we're working toward playing every, Wegman's still working, blah, blah, blah. Drink is preparing for Reed. If you saw his interview earlier this week, he basically said it's all semantics at Texas A&M. Marcel Reed is 3-0 as a starter, so why wouldn't you keep playing him? So Reed at 6,200, just a misprice for a starting quarterback with dual threat ability. Le'Veon Moss is number one in the backfield. Daniels does still get some run, but Moss would be the guy. Don't hate it at 5,500. But this wide receiver core is really where I'm looking. Noah Thomas had coming off a big game, 8 and 10 targets the last 2 games. Only 3,800. They priced him down for some reason, so that's an easy click for me in all formats. And then Jabri Barber, his usage has slowly been going up and up. He transferred from Troy, and now he's back and healthy again, but he's still min-priced. So it's just a couple of misprices. Allen and Walker are still out there, but Thomas and Barber are the first 2 guys I'm looking at for Texas A&M. Overall, just kind of a blah game. Maybe it'll shoot out. Maybe it'll be a slogfest. Like, it's one of those games that isn't really enticing. Probably a better real life football game than a DFS game. Other than some of these underpriced guys on the Texas A&M side. Boston College and Virginia. A couple of whoopsie daisy quarterbacks, both really expensive. In terms of how this slate looks, Castellanos has been doing all right. Hasn't done as much on the ground as we like, but he also hasn't been fully healthy. He should be back this game. I think it was more, precautionary last week than anything. As far as the backfield goes, Robichaud and Ward are actually getting similar usage in the ground game. Ward has just been more productive, and he's more of the receiving back. So if I'm looking at this backfield, it's Ward. And then Lewis Bond, and another underpriced wide receiver. For a wide receiver one who's going to get most of the looks, like all of the usage is funneling toward Bond. There's no reason he should be 4,500. So I like him in all formats as well. And then you can, these guys that are all sub 4K, all you need is a touchdown, three receptions and a touchdown, and you're there. So, as long as the guys see the field and they have the opportunity when they're that cheap, why not? On the Virginia side, Calandria, one of the most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. Not something you'd expect, but he's actually been balling out. So the upside is there. The only thing that concerns me is that his ceiling games were against Wake Forest and Richmond, so 2 FCS teams. And then, the backfield is a little bit more interesting for Virginia. Kobe Pace, running back 1. But Xavier Brown's not far behind. Last game, Brown had the big 75-yard run. He's getting just as much usage, or close, not just as much, but close to the same amount of usage as Pace now. So 3,300, I don't mind that. And then even Jack Greasy has been getting increased usage the last few games. But when you're looking at this backfield, you just go with the cheaper guy, right? Like if they're all going to be equal, go with the one who gets you the most savings. And then in this wide receiver room, Malachi Fields, clear number 1, very expensive, but for good reason. Trell Harris is going to be back. It really just nerfs the rest of this wide receiver room. Fields should be fine even with Harris back. I don't mind this as a sneaky game stack. It's a close game. So again, 27.5 and 26 team totals. You could very easily, each team could get another touchdown and be the highest scoring game on the slate. It's just a matter of where you're going to spend your money. Expensive quarterbacks, one expensive wide receiver, decently, like the running rooms is probably where I would go, honestly. If I'm stacking this game, that'd be where I'd look first and then kind of fill out with a couple of these other guys. A game that could be a little bit more stackable is this SMU Louisville game. A lot of good pricing here. On the SMU side, it's Kevin Jennings' job to lose now. He's going to keep starting. He has the rushing upside, especially if he gets a touchdown, 6,200, probably too cheap. Brashard Smith, coming off of a couple of monster games. He had like 46 DraftKings points against TCU, and SMU overall has been scoring a ton of points, since Jennings took over. So, 25 might be a little bit low. The one thing is like Florida State and Texas Christian's defense, probably not quite up to Louisville, but there's a lot of opportunity there. The one thing with this backfield is LJ Johnson is expected back. Now, I don't know that that's going to eat into Smith's usage too much. Maybe just a spell, like a breather here and there. But it's Brashard Smith's backfield, so not too concerned. 7,800 is just a matter of if you want to pay that with all of the value on this slate at running back. And then the wide receiver room, you could flip a coin 25 times and be wrong every single time with this wide receiver room. Not something that I'm really in love with. Maryland is a tight end that is on the field the most probably, but it's just so tough. It could be one guy one week and 2 other guys the next, and then none of them the week after that. So that's a tough click over there. Tyler Shuck is somebody at DraftKings must have it out for Tyler Shuck because he just keeps getting disrespected. His price doesn't go up. In fact, I think it's actually down. And he's been playing well. He hasn't had a game below 20 DraftKings points, and they still refuse to raise his price. So, I'm going to keep clicking his name as long as they keep him at 7,000. This backfield is a little bit more of a mystery. It's been Isaac Brown and Donald Chaney, but Kewan Brown is going to be involved too. So it's really tough to say who is going to be, Turner's going to be out, but it still leaves a 3-headed monster in the backfield. And then this wide receiver room, this is the more fun part of the Louisville team. Ja'Cory Brooks, still probably too cheap. He's priced up a little bit, but Colin Lacey is really where I'm looking. They didn't hardly price him up at all. I think maybe just $100 from last week. I think he was 3,300. Colin Lacey and Ja'Cory Brooks almost had the exact same stat line last week. 5 catches on 9 targets for 71 yards. The only difference is Brooks had 2 touchdowns. What happens if those touchdowns go to Lacey? We'd probably see a $5,000 Lacey. But Lacey could easily be wide receiver 1 on this team. Last week was just his first game back. So he should be honestly probably more expensive than Brooks, or at least kind of in the same price range as Brooks. So the extreme savings there. I think a lot of people are going to be clicking his name this week. It's one of those things we have these discussions in our college football team meetings every single week. And the discussion this week was, if you 150 max, do you have 150 lineups with Colin Lacey? And it sounds crazy, but this week I don't think it's that far fetched. But overall, also a very stackable game. The only reason you don't stack a game like this is because you might want to stack the very next game. Pittsburgh and North Carolina, both team totals over 30 points. We love to see that in DFS. And we kind of know where most of the usage is going to go, but there is a little bit of a wrinkle. On the Pittsburgh side, the big news is that Rodney Hammond is now eligible to play. And since it was an eligibility thing and not an injury, he has been practicing with the team. So at minimum price, I don't mind a dart throw, especially a team with a 33.5 point team total. We've seen how quickly Pittsburgh's offense is going to run this year. So do you want to take that chance? If you're doing 150 lineups, I don't mind a couple with Rodney Hammond because he was their number one back last year. And it sounds like he's ready to go. But otherwise, Holstein, it's weird seeing Holstein with a $9,000 price tag, but it's 100% warranted with the production he's had this year. Desmond Reed, do you think he gets hurt by Hammond coming back? Do you think, maybe it's just kind of like that situation that we saw above with Brashard Smith and LJ Johnson? Is it just Hammond coming back, getting his feet under him and, maybe giving Reed a breather here and there? So it's all about how you want to play it. I think both are priced appropriately. So, maybe considering cash if you have the money, definitely under consideration for GPP. And then this wide receiver room, it's Mumfield, Johnson, and Williams. Williams is on the field a ton, like 94% of the snaps is crazy. Mumfield is on the field a ton. Johnson, not quite as much, but they look to him for the big play. So, these prices are fair. Williams and Johnson might be a little underpriced. But any one of these top three guys, if you're game stacking this, I don't mind one or two of them even. And then on the North Carolina side, they've been embarrassed the last couple of weeks, getting blown out by James Madison and then, blowing that lead to Duke. Now they come home. They're underdogs against usually, what they might consider a cake matchup against Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh's undefeated this year. So, Criswell's a little bit expensive, but the ceiling is there, especially in this game environment. Omarion Hampton, the offense still runs through Omarion Hampton. He could be 95, 10K. He's kind of like Ollie Gordon was last year. You just kind of want to find a way to play him if you can. One of the best backs in the country. With the value at wide receiver and quarterback this week, you can certainly get Hampton into your line without too much issue. Wide receiver room, flip a coin. JJ Jones still very much in play. A tad expensive for my taste. I'd be looking more. The tight ends both had a big week, and they've been getting a little bit more attention. The last couple of games, Bryson Nesbitt and John Copenhaver. So I don't mind that. They're a little bit cheaper for that salary relief. Nate McCullum's hardly playing. He was one of their better wide receivers last year, and he just kind of disappeared. So the wide receiver room seems a little bit messy. And this North Carolina team's been a little bit messy the last couple of weeks. So, but definitely want to get some exposure here with this kind of game environment. But it's Hampton, Holstein, Reed, and one of these Pittsburgh wide receivers. And then the rest is kind of take your pick. Now, another game. This game could be a little bit sneaky. Two pretty bad football teams. Wake Forest, North Carolina State. North Carolina State, the home favorite. With Wake Forest, Hank Bachmeier's too cheap. He's been doing just fine, and he still has the flow. His hair is still great. Other than Ole Miss, he's scored 20 points on DraftKings every single game. This is a decent game environment for him to be able to do it. So 6,000 is just a little bit too cheap. I'll definitely have my eye on him. Claiborne is going to be the number one back in the backfield. Nothing mind-blowing as far as his numbers go, but he's been getting touchdowns. And last time I checked on DraftKings, it's good when your guys get touchdowns. So keeping an eye on him. And then the wide receiver room, Donovan Green is questionable. If he plays, he could easily be the number one wide receiver in this room. But he's not priced like it because he's been injured. He had a blow up at the beginning of the season, had a solid game and then a huge game, and then it just kind of fell off, got hurt, missed some time. So definitely somebody, if he's in, I'll have my eyes on. Taylor Morin is fine. Horatio Fields is a little bit more interesting. He's on the field a lot, and last week was the most targets he's had all season. Now, does that change if Green is back and fully healthy? It's yet to be determined, but again, more cheap wide receivers who are going to be on the field in a decent game environment. The other side, CJ Bailey, has, 5,100 I understand that he hasn't done a whole lot, but I mean, he played Clemson and still did fine. And then he didn't do anything particularly well against Northern Illinois, but that was just kind of a sloggy game. Wake Forest defense is bad. Like if Bailey can't get right in this game, he might not have a shot this year. But he has the rushing upside. He's 5,100. It allows you to do so much with your lineup if you wanted to get one of those expensive wide receivers that we've already talked about, or we'll be talking about Trey Harris when we get to Ole Miss. It's one of those things where 5,100 is just too cheap. And this backfield, your guess is as good as mine. It could be honestly any one of these guys. So, I thought it was going to be Waters, but Raphael's been getting a little bit more usage. Hollywood Smothers is splitting carries with those two. Bailey is eating into the running game. So they're just going to go with the hot hand. And then this wide receiver room, Concepcion fairly priced, actually a little bit cheaper than I would expect him to be. He's still the target guy. Even with Bailey, he's gotten 10 and 7 targets. And then Justin Jolie, 3,500. He's just too cheap. I mean, 6'3", 235, awesome tight end. And Bailey's going to try to get on the ball, especially in red zone situations. 3,500, what is he? He needs 12 points. I think that's fairly easy in this game environment. And then, Noah Rogers is like probably the clear number 3. And then the rest of it is, again, another take your pick situation. But a game that with 2 pretty bad teams, a couple of not so great defenses, could easily shoot out. We're not worried about how bad defenses in DFS is good for us, because that means the offensive side is going to have some opportunities. So I don't mind this stack, especially with a couple of teams with 30-point, or a few teams with 30-point team totals. People might overlook this game a little bit as a whole game stack anyway. The next, Purdue. Purdue's a mess. Hudson Card, a $4,700 starting quarterback. And you think, oh my gosh, that's insane. There's no way you can't overlook him. But he also has scored single digits on DraftKings every single game, except for the first game, which was against an FCS team. The one thing I will say is there might be a little bit of jolt in this offense because Graham Harrell was relieved of his duties as offensive coordinator. It's always going to be unknown how that goes. If the players didn't like Harrell, this could be a good thing. It could provide a little bit of spark. I don't know if at Wisconsin, at Camp Randall, is this going to be enough to make these guys playable. I mean, Maccabee is cheap. Love is cheap. They both kind of split carries. So how much do you love that in a road matchup, in a bad game script? They'll get them their carries still. It's just a matter of, how much is it worth to you when there's so much value everywhere else on the slate? I'm not going to talk you off of it, but a 16-point team total is never too thrilling. Max Clary gets nerfed a little bit because Edrine could be back. That's something we'll have to wait and see on, but those would be the 2 guys you'd look at if you're looking at anybody on Purdue. I might even go Reggie Love just for the price discount, but not a lot to love. On the Wisconsin side, it's a little bit different. So Wisconsin, Tyler Walker was already trending toward being the number 1 back in the backfield. It sounded like they wanted to get him the ball more. And then Ches Malusi just left the team Thursday. So he's walking away from the team, which it leaves it Tyler Walker's backfield. At 5,100 for an RB1 in a potential blowout, this is a game that, Tyler Walker could explode having the backfield to himself. Knowing Wisconsin, they're still going to mix in Yakameli and Dupree. I thought it'd be Jackson Acker, but he's not really done much this year. Dupree was getting more of the looks recently. And then as far as quarterback goes, Braden Locke at 5,400. The only reason I think he's being overlooked is because there's other cheap quarterbacks like CJ Bailey and Hank Bachmeier not too far off. Locke didn't look that bad for a lot of the game against USC. Like, he showed some flashes. So I don't mind that. Wide receivers, another wide receiver that's too cheap. I don't know that I play CJ Williams all by himself. Doesn't look like the rest of his team is going to be on FanDuel. So if you're playing FanDuel, CJ Williams playing an entire team by himself, I don't know if I like that. But, Will Pauling, still the top target. Bryson Green is on the field. Vinny Anthony had the big touchdown last week. So, if you wanted a couple of pieces from this Wisconsin side, I don't mind it at all. Sticking with the Big Ten, if it wasn't for Purdue, I'd say that UCLA is the worst team in the conference. They still might be. 9-point team total for a Big Ten team is pretty awful. For any team, it's pretty awful. For a Big Ten team, it's atrocious. UCLA might be without their starting quarterback Garbers. The Penn State, Franklin said, we're preparing for Garbers because we have film on Garbers. We can't prepare for ghosts. We don't have anything on Justin Martin or something like that. But Martin, he's a big dude. He's got a big arm, and he's a projected draft pick. So there's something there, but this team just seems so broken. TJ Harden's a shell of himself. Logan Loya saw his most targets of the season 2 weeks ago. And then last week he played exactly 2 snaps on punt return. So I don't even know what they're doing. Matavao, the tight end, is in, he's still on the field and in playing at 3,100, but there's so many sub 4K wide receivers. I don't know why you would go here in Happy Valley in such a bad matchup for UCLA. On the Penn State side, Singleton missed practice this week, but he should be good to go. Cam Wallace is going to be out, which should funnel more usage to Singleton and Allen. Aller is fairly priced at 8,200. These running backs are fairly priced. They're on the field, virtually the same. Singleton just does more in the passing game especially, but Allen has been getting a few more carries. Tyler Warren is clearly Drew Aller's favorite target, maybe the coach's favorite target too. There's been some glowing reviews of Tyler Warren. Harrison Wallace is still on the field. Amari Evans, he had the big game against Kent State, but what can you really say about that? Fleming has underperformed this year, so it's really the running room and maybe Aller and Warren, potentially Wallace, but you're not looking at much more. Mostly GPP plays in this, not much from the UCLA side. Another blowout, shouldn't take too long. Auburn and Georgia. Auburn with only a 14-point team total. Peyton Thorne's going to start the rest of the year. He is experienced, so that's the one thing he has going for him, 7,100. It's a price thing. If he was 5,500, you'd have to consider it because consider not playing him just because of the other cheap quarterbacks on the slate. Jarquez Hunter still leading this backfield. 5,500 is a good price that we haven't seen him down here yet this year. Again, matchup. Keandre Lambert-Smith, still wide receiver 1, cheaper than we've seen him. It's the same old story for everybody. Same story for everybody on Auburn. It's not a great matchup. Cam Coleman at 3,900. He's starting to creep up with his usage and get more targets now that he's healthy again. A freshman wide receiver at Georgia. I don't know if it's the spot because Cam Coleman ain't Ryan Williams. But at 3,900, if you're playing 150 lineups and you have him in a few, I wouldn't mind. But the rest of this wide receiver room, I'm not clicking. In Georgia, on the Georgia side, Beck, it's a price thing, solid play. ETN, priced fairly. He might be actually a little bit too cheap, so I don't mind a little bit of ETN. Nate Frazier is a freshman running back that I thought was going to have more of a workload, but Kirby Smart basically just said he's doing all the right things in practice, putting in the work, and then they're just not putting him on the field, even though he had a pretty decent game against Clemson to start the season. So Cash Jones is cheap enough that, especially if you think this blowout script hits, Cash Jones could see a little bit more usage. In the wide receiver room, all of these guys are priced mid. I don't know. It could be any one of them. Lovett, Smith, Bell, even throw Young in. Oscar Delp has been surpassed by Lawson Lucky, it seems like, in the tight end room. But, are you going to pay for a $4,500 Lawson Lucky with these wide receivers in front of him, or are you going to go pay $1,000 less for Justin Jolie at NC State if you're really, in love with the tight end? So more like the Georgia side. Pretty obvious with the game script and spread and everything. Ole Miss to South Carolina. Ole Miss put everybody on their injury report, so they're all marked. these are all legitimately on the SEC student athlete injury report. You're not seeing things. The one fun note I have about this game, though, is that so far this season, Ole Miss is averaging 6.2 points per drive on their first drive, and South Carolina hasn't allowed a first drive score. So one of those things is going to have to give. So we'll see which one it is. South Carolina at home, even as an underdog, they can put up some points. Jackson Dart, really expensive. Do you want to pay for him? Or you want to pay a couple $100 more for Milroe? Don't mind it if you're stacking Ole Miss, especially, even though it's a pretty difficult stack to do. Henry Parrish left last week, but he came back. So 6,900 again. He's going to get the usage. Matt Jones is probable. So yeah, it's a usage thing for me, or a price thing for me, I should say. He will get the usage. Prices a little bit like kind of in the limbo region where I'd rather pay up for somebody like Tootin maybe, or go down. Then the wide receiver, it's all going to go to Harris. I mean, Antoine Wells, the one thing is that it's a revenge game. So they might try to get him the ball a little bit more to score on his own old squad in his old stadium. At 4,500, I don't mind that at all. Half the price of Trey Harris, there's a legitimate chance that point per dollar Wells could be the better play. It's just a matter of how your lineup is structured. And if you want the raw points, pre-scoring, greatest tight end in the land, but there's so many options at wide receiver. Sellers and Sanders coming off injury both, but they're both good to play. I don't mind either of them in this situation at their prices. They're running back 1, running back 2. Not really looking at much in the wide receiver room. Nick Harbor's cheap, but he lived up to expectations. Larvadain didn't do much coming off of injury to start the season. So it's Sellers and Sanders for me on South Carolina. South Carolina's kept it close against a couple of, really solid teams, but, Ole Miss's defense isn't LSU's defense. Ole Miss defense is a little bit better than LSU. So, yeah, I mean, South Carolina could keep it close, but so if you want a game stack, I don't hate it. It's one cheap side, one expensive side, with a couple of value pieces. Not the worst idea in the world, Bob. Virginia Tech at Stanford, another solid total. The Virginia Tech side, we're looking at Kyron Jones at quarterback, who's dual threat. We know exactly what he is. He's a little bit overpriced, in my opinion. The upside is there. We just haven't seen it a ton this year. Bashal Tootin, though, maybe the workhorse of all workhorses on this slate. 7,600 is a fair price for him. I definitely don't mind him. Going to be in consideration for all formats for me. The wide receiver room, good luck figuring it out. I mean, Lane is still probably the top guy. Steven Gosnell, probably too cheap, but the wide receiver room's a little bit healthier. Benji Gosnell's a tight end who scored last week. So, they're like all these guys are cheap again. Allie Jennings was back, and you thought maybe he would take over as a starter, but Aiden Green actually saw more work than he did, and Green had the big touchdown. So maybe we'll see a little bit more Aiden Green this week. But you're kind of playing a guessing game. And then Ashton Daniels got benched last game. Maybe he was hurt. Maybe he was just playing bad. I think he was actually hurt. So we'll have to see if he's going to come back. I think he will. Micah Ford has been the guy in the backfield. He's a cheap RB1. But is it going to be 15 carries like it was last game, or single digits like it was the game before? We can't know for sure. But definitely have to consider him at 4,100. Io Manor still wide receiver 1 in this wide receiver room. Still getting a ton of targets. However, Emmett Mosley the fifth, Emmett Mosley V, had a big breakout game. He's a freshman. Had, I think, 8 or 9 targets last game, and he scored a touchdown. He was min-priced last week, and DK actually made the adjustment for once and priced him up to 4,700. Possibly an overreaction, but at that price, especially if you're going to be game stacking this game, if you wanted to go with somebody like Tootin and Drones and then run it back with Daniels and, Mosley to get a little bit different from the people who only know the Io Manor name, I don't mind it at all. And again, a close enough spread and high enough total that it could shoot out and, be a sneaky game. Iowa and Ohio State, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. Don't need to worry about the passing game or receiving game for Iowa. Caleb Johnson, very, very expensive. Maybe the, top 5 running back in the land. But this is going to be the biggest test of the season at Ohio State. I don't know if I love this spot, especially at that price. LaShawn Williams is returning from injury that could maybe cut into it a little bit. Kamari Moulton is kind of trending towards a red shirt after starting the season because it was Moulton because Johnson was out the first game. But not a lot to love on Iowa, especially with Johnson's price being that high. Even, Johnson's like, oh, if Ohio State recruited me, I probably still wouldn't even go. I think he's lying through his teeth. But that's neither here nor there. That's all game talk, getting his team pumped up. On the Ohio State side, everybody's priced fairly. Will Howard is fine. 7,500 might be a little bit too cheap for him, but really Judkins and Henderson, either or could have, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jeremiah Smith, absolute stud. Egbuka gets a lot of usage. Carnell Tate, sweet. G. Scott. Like, honestly, all of these guys, they're priced fairly. James Peoples in the backfield is getting a little more usage, but that could just be game script. I don't really have a favorite play from this game at all, but I wouldn't mind if you wanted to one-off piece from Ohio State just with a 32-point team total. The highest total, lowest spread game on the slate might be the highest total overall too. West Virginia at Oklahoma State. West Virginia, Garrett Green. We've seen him at 9K last year, maybe even this year, but 8K is probably too cheap for him. Definitely looking at him in all formats. Still a split backfield, but Donaldson is getting more carries, and he's the cheaper back, so I don't hate it. And then this wide receiver room, Clement is probably number one. Like, seems like the clear target guy, but it's not like a huge gap. Traylon Ray for $500 cheaper. If they could easily see the same money usage on any given day. Again, if you're stacking this game, you're just going to have to pick if you want part of this receiving core or not. Green is playable naked. Green is stackable with one of these wide receivers. Green is stackable with one of these running backs. And then on the other side, Bowman is priced fairly. He's had a couple of really bad games and a couple of ceiling games. This seems like a spot where it could be a ceiling game, though. West Virginia's a pass funnel, and he's got 3 really good wide receivers. So I'm starting to like this Bowman wide receiver stack a little bit more. Stribling has been on an every other game thing. I kind of mentioned it last week too, but he's still solidly in play. These receivers are too cheap. Rashad Owens is, just as likely to have a ceiling, maybe not just as likely, but he could easily have a ceiling game higher than Stribling. So like all 3 of these wide receivers, Shetron even has a decent opportunity at that price. Still waiting for that Ollie Gordon breakout game. With how bad West Virginia's pass defense is, I don't know that I love it here, but why couldn't it be here? And you're going to get him at lower ownership. But really, there's 100 different ways you could stack this game. Again, we have value on this side of the ball, a little bit more expensive on this side, but some clear value here too. Rutgers and Nebraska, maybe the most boring game on the slate, could actually be a decent football game for Rutgers at all. Monungai would be the only guy. He's just really expensive. He's probably matchup proof, but not looking at a ton there. And then on the Nebraska side, Jamal Banks, he's kind of turning into wide receiver 1 maybe. Nayor is still up there, but Banks had the big game. They didn't move his price at all. I think they actually priced him down. So 3,800 is still too cheap for him, even with such a low team total in a sloggy looking game environment. Barney had the big game last week, so 3,400, don't mind him. Rayola's 5,400. Again, it's just compare him to the other guys on the slate. Nebraska's been passing a little bit more, but it's still, you gotta go side by side with guys like Bailey and Bachmeier and all the other guys in that 5 to 6K range. Dowdle let a lot of people down last week. We think he's still running back 1, and Emmett Johnson just had the hot hand. But I don't know that you're looking at any of these guys in this game environment other than GPP. And then the last game on the slate, Alabama Vanderbilt, huge total for Alabama. Jalen Milroe, probably the Heisman frontrunner right now, and he's priced like it. 10-4 is, with the season he's been having, he's got 50-point upside. Like there's no reason he shouldn't be 10-4. So I'm still looking at Milroe in all formats, especially with all of the value. The backfield's a little bit more of a question mark if it's going to be Haynes or Miller. It had been Miller for a while, but really it could be either of these guys. And then this wide receiver room, Ryan Williams, 17-year-old stud. Arguably the best freshman wide receiver out of the class. Smith still has a case, but 7,300 is a tough price to pay, especially if you want to stack him with Milroe. That eats up a lot of salary. Jeremy Bernard is actually a guy I'm looking at because of the price difference, and he's still on the field. And he's still getting looks. So it's really a price play for me with Bernard. But, it could be Prentice too. But Williams and Bernard are really the top two I'm looking at. And on the Vanderbilt side, they might actually be able to put up some points at home. It's a solid letdown spot for Alabama coming off a big emotional victory. So I don't mind Pavia. He's priced in that awkward spot. But Eli Stower's at 4K, a very solid option for Vanderbilt. He actually came over with Pavia and Jerry Kill from New Mexico State, and they had a connection in New Mexico State. So if Vanderbilt can keep it close, this could be the sneakiest of all sneaky game stacks. It could end up being like a 35-28 sort of score, or it could be close up until the fourth quarter, which makes me love Milroe even more. If Vanderbilt can keep it close for 3 quarters and force 4 quarters out of Milroe, then you're looking at an explosion game. So, don't mind that as a sneaky game as well. But that's it for the slate. If you like this stone and you want more colors to it, if you think this looks too boring, oh my gosh, I'm going to give you a sneak peek, because you know what? We do stones for weekday slates when they're big enough too. We have a 4-game slate Friday of this week. So we have a colored stone. Oh, look, we have pace, pass defense, rush defense, run pass percentage, target share, rushes per game, all of the things that you need. Is he a cash play? Is he high upside? Is he a GPP? All of the things you need all in one place. And how do you get that? You sign up for SHIPIT Nation. And SHIPIT Nation isn't a site that wants to bend you over and make you spend all of your money on content so you don't have anything left for DFS. I know for all access, it's $700 for the entire year, which is a steal. And then you can add on the optimizer if you want to. If you don't have to. But we have NFL, PGA, MLB, MMA, and now's the time to do it. We're still in MLB season, hitting the postseason. College football and NFL are in full swing. NBA, NHL right around the corner. Our guys are killing it in the MMA streets. We have Tambo, who Degenerate 75. We got Title and Marley on MMA, like guys that you'd get very familiar with because they're the best in the business. And if you don't want to do all access, you can just pick a sport too. Football is college football and NFL. It's not just one or the other. You get both. PGA, it's swing season, but we don't care. We're still putting out content. We still had a live stream this week with Degen 75. So just it's really however you want to do it. It caters to your needs. And as you'll see, we have so many flags at the top of these leaderboards. We had, again, this isn't just one sport. This is MMA. These are golf swing season. These are NFL, college football. And I accidentally clicked this tab. I'll show you too. We have our own. This is a touchdown hoedown listener league that I talked about earlier. I just want to shout out W. Berglund quick because I put this tab in the wrong spot. Oh, silly me. But again, great structure. You can see 500 to first, half a first to second, 10% of first to 10th. But yeah. This is what you'll see if you join the nation. You're going to see a lot more of these flags, and you're going to see them all in the community too. The Discord is where it's at. I love the community. I love the people that are in it. Great camaraderie, great back and forth. And there's not a single sport that we cover at SHIPIT Nation that isn't covered like a blanket. So whatever your fancy is, we'll tickle it. But most of all, remember, rule number 1, college football is fun. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the sweat. Enjoy the grind. Enjoy seeing your teams at the top of the leaderboards, and we will see you next week.